I just think that creative finance is the biggest opportunity in 2024. Do you agree or disagree? Deanna McIntyre, welcome to the Raw Built channel. How are you?
Oh man, I'm feeling like real special to be here today. Finally up in the ranks. I can actually be on your channel. It's like,
You
whoa,
did
I'm
it.
on the
You've
inside.
made it. So tell us
Made
a
it
little
in
bit about
life.
yourself. What do you do? What kind of investing do you do? All that good stuff.
Yep. So I'm a Bigger Pockets author. That's one of the main ways that we know each other, focusing on MTRs or midterm or medium term rentals. But I got my start in short term rentals, which is another
right.
reason that we're friends.
This guy right here. This is the Bible on midterm rentals. So anyone watching this, go buy this. I'll leave a link in the description down below.
Please do. And I wonder if your code still works, right? Rob for 10% off. You should try.
Ooh, yeah, I think it does. Rob, I think
I
it's you
think it
10%
does.
off of all the Bigger Pocket stuff. So yes, thank you for the reminder. I always forget to say that.
Yeah, totally. But lately, my latest and greatest baby is all creative finance, which you know because I work with your creative campers. Yeah.
Yeah, you've been delivering some crazy deals to my students, and you just have such a good methodology for finding deals and hunting down deals. And so I wanted to bring you on the channel to sort of talk about the market as you've seen it in the past couple years and how it's changing and how you're adapting, because I know that you're not only an investor, but you're also a realtor as well, right?
I am. Yeah, they call us unicorn realtors, the couple that do creative finance. Doesn't seem like there's many of us out there, honestly.
Yeah, but when I meet one, it's always really special because you understand the ins and outs. So we'll get into creative finance here in a second, but what's working right now and what's not working right now for people that are looking to not just get into short-term rentals, but just rentals in general. Give us a little bit of an overview of what you've been seeing.
Yeah. So, I mean, the reason that creative finance is so important right now is because interest rates are still high. And what was surprised so many of us is that when interest rates went up, prices didn't come down. We kind of always thought that that would be like a seesaw, right? That one would come down. And I still think as interest rates go down, prices will go up. So people do want to buy now while there's less competition out there, right? So it's a great opportunity to try to do creative finance deals now where you could take over someone's interest rate that is maybe in the threes. I think still 90% of mortgages that are out there are, I think, under 4%. So there's a really great opportunity to take over some of these loans.
Yeah, so for reference, for anyone that's listening to this, interested in getting in real estate, we had an amazing run from like 2017 to 2022, roughly in that space where interest rates were 2.5 to 4%. And over the last couple of years, we've obviously seen the interest rates go from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 to 9%, even if you have a DSCR loan, which is a debt service coverage ratio loan. Moral of the story, a lot of people have been saying Airbnb is dead, it doesn't work. And I actually kind of agree with those people because when you buy an Airbnb at a 9% interest rate, it's really hard to cash flow. It's not impossible, but it's harder to cash flow. And so you have found this niche where basically you are helping people get into these homes that are low interest rate. So I want to talk about that. You've said the word creative finance. I love how I'm pretending like I don't know what this is. You've talked about creative finance.
What is that?
What is that? What is creative finance? After I've had Pace Morby on the channel like 50 times already. Tell us what creative finance is and help break that down for someone at home that may not be familiar with it. Because it's such a broad term, creative finance, that it doesn't, you're like, what does that mean? Does that mean like, is it artful finance? So break it down for someone that has never heard this term before.
I definitely think it is an art, but I want to plug in one more thing. You were talking about, the Airbnb bust that everybody was talking about for 2023. And if you look at AirDNA's report, I think it's always really cool to look at, but they did one for 2024 and they were showing that 2023 is the first year where it actually went down, that the RevPAR was going down, that price per night that you can do per room. And that was like the first time aside from the little blip of COVID, but every year over year, it's been growing. And so 2023 was a crap year, but 2024 is showing 11% demand comeback. So it seems like even if you suck at this, you can probably do a little bit better this year. So I think that's nice for people to know that like actually there is a little silver lining and a little, positivity coming
Big
around
time.
the corner.
Well,
Yeah.
man, I gotta say most of my properties right now, I think Most of them are outperforming last year's performance, with a couple that have fallen. Like at the beginning of 2023, it looked like a lot of my properties were falling 15 to 30%. And I was like, wait a minute, what? And then now that I have the whole year data, actually a lot of my properties ended up either being exactly the same or about 3% more. And then you have instances like my Scottsdale property, which I think is going to do like $100,000 more this year because we've started to fine tune that property. So I think people who are hurting right now bought high interest Airbnbs and weren't really great at the hosting side of it, or great operators, or they cheaped out. And so you hear all those reports of people that are like getting squashed right now. And it's most of the time a result of cheap looking Airbnbs with high interest rates. And those guys are the people that, cry the most on TikTok.
Yeah. I feel bad for those people because I got started so early that back in the day, you just had furniture. I was like, wow, you have furniture in a place.
The good old
you do
days.
Great. Yeah. But let me get back to your question about creative finance. So the one that people know the most is seller financing, which is usually when the seller has the home paid off and then you can negotiate anything under the sun. Often sellers want 20% down and they want whatever interest rate is on the market, right? But you can negotiate, 0, 5%. You can negotiate 3% interest. Like there's so many ways to kind of create whatever you want. And that's what I love about these deals is it's only limited by whatever you can come up with. Now, the cool kid on the scene is called subject to, and it's not the only other way to do creative finance. There's so many others, but this is the one that Pace Morby has made famous. And basically the concept of subject to is that when you buy a home, when they do the title search, they are finding if there's any liens on the property. So that could be, just some disgruntled, plumber who didn't get paid, or it can be an actual mortgage, right? And so you're signing off saying, hey, this mortgage is going to stay with the property and I'm going to keep paying for it. So it doesn't actually get paid off. And then you just take over the payments. A lot of times people want to think this is an assumption. You're not assuming anything. It doesn't change into your name, but that means you don't have to qualify for it, which is really great for people that can't qualify for loans anymore. So subject to has been just a godsend for people.
Yeah. I mean, it's this idea of using leveraging someone else's credit to expand your leverage and to expand your real estate portfolio. And I actually think that subject to, for the most part, is often a win-win I'm going to get burned in the comments for saying this, but one of the more ethical sides of real estate, simply because a lot of people get mad at real estate investors for buying up homes or wholesalers for taking advantage of grannies who have a lot of equity in their homes. And oftentimes it's subject to, people want out of those homes. They lose their job, they're relocated, they're upside down on their homes, and they're like, man, if I go and I sell my property conventionally and I pay a realtor 6% and I pay closing costs, I might have to come out of pocket $5,000 to $20,000 just to sell my own house. And they're in a lot of pain. Most Americans don't have $5,000 to $20,000 in their bank account. So you have these investors that come in and take over payments and kind of relieve them of that. And now it sort of creates this win-win, right?
Yeah. And I'm so big on creating win-wins. I think the wholesalers do get a bad rap in taking advantage or almost kind of stealing people's properties. And it doesn't have to be like that. There can be someone wanting to just get out of a property. Maybe they're hurting because they're not actually making their mortgage payment every month. And that can be an investor or somebody who's just living in the home. And then you can sell it to an operator who's professional like you, or someone who runs a management company, and they can turn that property around and all of a sudden make a great profit on it. So yes, there's ways to make it win for both sides.
For sure. So you talked about seller financing and subject to, also known as sub to, and those are two subsets of creative financing. But as I understand the term, creative financing is effectively the art of financing something, in this case, property. And instead of financing it traditionally through a bank, you are financing it using unconventional methods. And an unconventional method basically means just no bank. No bank is in this picture.
Yes, it's a relationship.
Right. And so when you talk about creative finance, I mean, it is a broad term, but if you really boil it down, it's how can I creatively finance something that I really want without having to, go to a bank and without having to submit 10 years of tax returns and that random Chipotle receipt where you bought guacamole in 2013 and all that good stuff. And so I have purchased a couple of properties creatively over the last year. I gotta say, it's really hard for me to make the case to use a bank ever again. Obviously there's a time and a place, and a lot of realtors would be like, what are you saying, man? This is how we make money. But for me, I just think the creative finance opportunity where you can go direct to seller and finance to them, or you can take over someone's payments. I don't know. It's just like, why wouldn't I do that? It seems like a much easier process. And I want to talk about how you find these deals, because most of the time I talk about these deals that I have where I got a 3% interest rate with my seller finance home down the road, or a 2.375% VA loan that I took over. And people are like, okay, big guy, that's cool, but you're Rob. Of course, people send you deals all the time, but this isn't something that regular people can do. So I want to talk about how you find these deals and how the everyday person could possibly go out and obtain a creatively financed home.
Rob, I'm not a regular person either. Let's be honest.
Yeah. You're a unicorn.
I couldn't help it. Yeah. So the easiest way, I think, is through Facebook groups. So there's a million Facebook groups out there, especially the ones that are targeted towards creative finance. You'll see deals popping up on those all the time, and you can search by state or city and network with different wholesalers that are commonly releasing deals in that area. That's the best way to go about it. And even as a wholesaler myself, I sometimes market other wholesalers' deals. Of course, sometimes I get my own, but we help each other out. So the more you can network with people finding deals, the better chances you have. And then definitely don't just be a lurker. Post what you're looking for. I know both of us have had good success with this, where it's you just come up with a really clear buy box of what you're looking for in a certain area, and people will reach out to you. How easy is that? So I think utilize the Facebook groups, and it can be creative finance groups. It can also be ones that are specific to just investors in that area. And then you could also try ones that are Airbnb if you're looking for those kinds of properties. You'd be surprised how many people are just kind of tired. They're already tired of operations, and they're like, hey, maybe I would consider this.
Well, I just locked up a deal literally today, about an hour and a half ago, from a seller who, really nice guy. He sent me a message and he said, hey man, I've got this property. It's a luxury property. It takes a lot of work, and it was more than I thought. And I'm going to be working with my students to get that into the community. But basically, he allowed me to come in and take over his $681,000 mortgage, take over payments. And I'm putting down $50,000 because he has about like $250,000 of equity in that home. So I'm giving him $50,000. And then the remaining $150,000, he's financing to me over 30 years amortization, and it balloons in 10 years, 0% interest, principal only payments. And it's a crazy deal because when you factor in the seller finance portion with the $5,500 mortgage, my mortgage is like $6,000 a month on that. And it rents for anywhere from $10,000 a month on Airbnb. And his highest month is $29,000 because he throws a bunch of weddings and stuff. But it's a job. Yeah. It's a job. It's not an easy property. And that's why he's like, look, it makes good money, but I can't do this anymore. And I'm like, great. He's in pain. I want to help him. And I want to pair him up with someone that really wants a property and wants a little bit more of the operational toll, but wants to get into this property for like less than $100,000. Because if they went conventionally, they'd have to put down 25%, which is about $180,000 plus the furnishings. He's giving me the furnishings. But if someone bought this house, they'd have to put 180 down. They'd have to spend at least 50,000. I mean, probably like it's a 6,000 square foot home. So they'd probably have to spend like 75 to 100 to do it correctly. And already this deal becomes a $300,000 deal out of pocket for anyone that wants to buy this on the MLS. And I'm setting this up for my students where they come in and they pay, I don't know what the final after closing costs and everything, but I'm gonna say 75 grand, less than 10% to take over this. And that to me is like quintessential creative finance deal. Someone is just tired and we're walking into that situation. And I think genuinely helping them out.
Well, and I think that thing you're not talking about that I also think is so valuable about creative finance is that like people like you and I, our shit's messy. Like if you have to go get a loan and then show all the loans and all the ways that you make income, and my like tax return is like 300 pages, it's just like nobody wants to deal with me when I'm trying to get a loan. So just the fact that I can just give people a little bit of my personal credentials, sometimes people don't even ask about who the buyer is, which shocks me. It's amazing that you can just kind of bypass that whole step.
Yeah, and I think that it's like a scary easy thing because this property that I bought not too long ago, that seller, all he asked me for was like some kind of credit report, and I just went to creditkarma.com and took a screenshot of my credit, and I was like, here you go. And he was like, this is great. And that's all I needed to facilitate that transaction. We closed in like 2 weeks. It was the fastest closing ever. And so I do want to give the caveat to everybody that just because you can can creatively finance a deal doesn't mean that you should. You should always still be thinking about it as an investor, as leverage. Can I handle this? Can I scale accordingly? Because I've also heard a lot of stories of people that went out and went on a rampage and acquired 30 of these properties and got a bunch of PMLs, private money lenders, and then defaulted. And now that kind of gives a bad name to this industry too. Anyone listening to this, it's an amazing strategy, but what I always say on this channel is scale accordingly and make sure that you can actually handle the payments, because it's still real estate and we're still dealing with a lot of money, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, that was the first thing I was thinking about when you're talking about this luxury property that you just got as a cool deal. It's like that one is going to be more work than other deals. So you probably don't want to throw a newbie on that and be like, hey, it is a low entry. Great. And there's a lot of potential income. But if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to be, in over your head real fast. So you want to be careful, because $6,000 a month is still a lot of money to pay if you can't cover that. Yeah.
And it hurts to pay, right? Like there will be slow seasons where you might make 2,000 because it's like really hot in Albuquerque in June and maybe no one books it there. And can you handle the $4,000 expense? You got to know that going into it. One of the other things I wanted to sort of talk about was you mentioned how like your tax returns are messy. Believe me, no one understands that more than me. I make a decent income now and the bank is like, you're poor. Sorry, we will not give you this loan, even though you can buy this house cash. Happens all the time. It's so frustrating. And creative finance really seems to be benefiting a very particular group of people. Well, everybody that does it, but people who are 1099 earners, entrepreneurs, self-employed, or really skilled investors with high DTI, debt to income ratio. These are like sort of the four sets of people that have a tough time getting banks. And so when you're cracking down on these deals, is that typically like that sort of solves this issue for those types of people, right?
I would say, yeah. There's really nothing in the way of providing some proof that you can be a buyer. That part's the easiest.
Yeah. So what is it? Let's say you find one of these deals. You mentioned the Facebook group, which there are a lot of interesting methods on how you can use Facebook to get creative finance deals. But let's say you find one that you like, and then you're like, I want this. How long does it typically take to close on a creative finance deal?
I've closed them in as little as 10 days. So they're like cash and they can close really quickly. And it's just the matter of how long title takes to come back. So that can be your only holdup. But that's another advantage for a seller, is that lots of sellers right now, if they go on market with their property, not only are they paying 6% in commissions, but they might sit for a while and then may have to do price reductions. But you could just post a property. If you're listening right now and you're like, man, I want to get rid of a property, you could also reach out to Rob or I. But you could post it and you could probably get somebody and close in like 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how quick someone is interested. So that's just a great way to do it, especially if it's an Airbnb, because I think a lot of people don't realize if you're going to have buyers walking through your Airbnb, you're not going to have booking, right? Or you won't be able to show it because you've got too many bookings. And then it sits and people start to think there's something wrong with that property.
That actually happened to me with a home that I built in Joshua Tree. It's called Casa Mariposa. It was a small home and we were like, yeah, let's just list it for like a crazy amount. And if it sells, like whatever. And we didn't think we would actually get offers on it. And we didn't for like 2 months, maybe 3, because it was so booked on Airbnb and we had to cancel on people like every day. They weren't able to come and tour the property. And then finally someone got in and we were about to delist it because we're like, you know what? Let's not do it. It's crushing it on Airbnb. We got 2 offers that same day because someone could finally make it in. But I totally understand what you're saying. It's like, if it sits for a long time, it starts to look uglier for no apparent reason other than there must be something wrong with it. And it's kind of crazy how fast creative finance deals move. But I mean, I think one of the questions that a lot of people have in this world is, let's say you can close quickly, but what about like inspections and appraisals? Like, is that process the same? Is it different? Do you not do it? Like, how does that work?
We generally don't do appraisals. They're costly and they take a lot of time, right? So an appraisal generally can take up to 3 weeks. And that's the thing that really holds up transactions in general. And they don't always tell you that much. So often I see appraisals come in exactly at the offer price. And I'm like, did you do any work there? So, whatever. I take it with a grain of salt. It is important to look at comps and make sure that if you are paying more than a market rate, that you have an idea of how much that is and you're okay with it. Because sometimes these deals do sell for over market rate.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit. I've seen that going around. It's always a controversial take, I feel like, one way or another. But why would anyone ever want to pay above market price for a property? That seems kind of crazy.
Because they're getting really good terms. So the way I like to look at it is it's like a seesaw. When one thing goes up, the other things can come down, vice versa. So if you have a really low down payment, sometimes people are like, well, I don't really need the money, So maybe they can make payments to me over time and I'll just take a small down payment. If you're just paying like $15,000 to get into a home, yeah, maybe you're okay paying a point higher on the interest rate, or maybe you're going to pay, $50,000 more at the purchase price. So you can kind of move numbers around. Sometimes when people want a zero interest loan, they're paying a higher purchase price so that they're still paying that interest somewhere, but they're paying it later, right? So it's all kind of moving those pieces around.
Yeah, and I think, buyer beware and make sure that you're running your own calculations for what you're comfortable with. But I think the easiest way to illustrate this is, and I'll talk about some of the math here, but with a creative finance deal, I'll talk about this deal that I closed here in Houston. It's about a 5-minute walk from my house. It's in the Heights. It is like the best neighborhood in Houston, Texas. And it was on the market for a couple months and it said owner financing. And for whatever reason, nobody wanted it. It makes no sense to me to this day. Maybe I'll find out later on once I go into the attic or something. But basically, I got that property at a 3% interest rate. And so that makes my PITI, principal, insurance, taxes, and oh my gosh, I'm on interest. Samsonite, I was way off.
It's because you kept saying insurance before interest, and that just messed you right up
too. Yep. So my PITI is basically $19.50. It's somewhere like that. Now, had I gone and bought that conventionally, my PITI at an 8% interest rate would have been about $3,000. And so because of that, I'm now paying an extra $1,000 every single month in interest, which is $12,000 a year, which is $24,000 in 2 years and $50,000 in 4 years in additional interest. Whereas if I just paid an extra, let's say $15,000 over market value, someone would be like, why on earth would you ever do that? And I'm like, well, the interest that I'll save over the course of 30 years, 'cause I'm going to own this thing forever, is like 6 figures. I just get to smash my principal payments a lot faster with the lower interest rate. So I think it does work in a lot of scenarios like that where, I don't know, it's kind of funny too that I've realized is, I know you've seen this because you're a realtor, but like literally 2 years ago, like 3 years ago, people were making like $100,000. They were frothing at the mouth to lock up a cabin in the Smoky Mountains, $100,000 over asking, and nobody was giving them crap for it. So now whenever someone does that at a 0% interest rate, people are like, what? You're dumb. So it's interesting to me.
Yeah, I think what people don't realize, and you just have to sit down with a mortgage calculator to figure this out, is that I've had clients where they're like, well, let's just lowball, maybe the house is 400,000 and they're like, let's, offer 360. But even if you're offering 360 and you're getting a conventional loan, if their creative finance loan was like 3% instead of 7%, your mortgage payment is going to be incredibly low, so much lower than even if you try to lowball them, and they're probably not going to go for that anyway, right? So I think creative finance is always the first option. If you can't find it, then try to go another route. But I don't even look at normal conventional stuff anymore.
Yeah, I haven't gone on the MLS unless I'm like trying to pull comps. But even then, a 0% interest creative finance home is just so much more powerful to me than going the other route. So I'll try to always make those deals work. I want to talk about one of the deals that literally closed today. Our first deal that you brought to my group, which again, thank you so much. It's a cabin in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Do you happen to know the figures for that property? I mean, it's very topical right now. Cody Haas, he's one of my host campers. And I called him today to congratulate him on it. But yes, I'd love to kind of break down that deal and how we got creative with some of the terms there.
Yeah, I can figure it out. I think I remember a couple things. So what do you got? One thing I do want to come back to, because you asked me and then I didn't answer it, is inspections. So yes, I actually require everyone to do an inspection. They ask me all the time, oh, can I still do an inspection? I'm like, you have to. Because if you come back later and you say that I didn't let you do it or you didn't feel like you could, like, I don't want that liability on me. So 100%, we always do inspections.
Yeah. I mean, it's like basically buying a house the conventional way in terms of you still want your basic mechanics here. It's just accelerated. Yeah. It's faster.
Yeah. So the property that Cody bought, it was listed at $625. And it is a 3-2 furnished cabin. They were asking $625 with 75% or 75,000 down, which is 12%. And so he negotiated $612 with $500 after that and $67,500 down. So he kind of just got a slightly better rate. Their interest rate was 5%. So, not exactly super, super low, but still great compared to what he would get now is probably still 7.75, something like that.
Yeah, as DSCR, no doubt.
Yeah, totally. And then there was an additional 40K in equity that he'll be paying on a balloon. So he doesn't have any extra payments. He's just making their normal PITI payment, which is about $3,500.
So on the seller finance portion, you said there's a balloon. So that basically means at the end of that balloon, like a balloon is when it matures. And so at the end of the term that he set in the seller finance side, how does that work? Will he have to cut him a check? Does he refi out? Is it up to him?
Well, he did it kind of a unique way. So he did a 5-year balloon on the mortgage, but he did a 3-year balloon on the equity. And the equity is pretty small. It's only $40,000. So that might be something easy for him to pull from another property or even just save up for or something like that so he can keep the mortgage a bit longer. But usually the way people do get that is that they just refinance. They do like a cash out refi and they pay off whatever they need to pay off.
And this is really where we start getting in the juice of it a little bit. Like, how much did he put down again on this?
67,500. So just a little over 10% down.
Yeah. And you said 5% and you're like, not the greatest deal, but keep in mind, if he went to a bank, if he went to a bank, he'd have to put 120K down or maybe 140 or 50, depending on if he did 25%. And he would be getting a 7.75% interest rate and he would have to go through underwriting. And so even though these terms aren't a 0% or a 2 or a 3, it's still better than going to a bank. And that's how I analyze these deals. Is every deal I ask myself is a creative finance deal better than a bank? Most of the times it is, but sometimes obviously some of the terms aren't the most favorable. And one of the things I like about this deal, this kind of is the intersection for me. This is what I call creative hosting. And this is what I'll be talking a lot more on the channel, but this is basically the collision of creative finance and hosting. That is creative hosting. And that's where you use creative finance strategies to boost your hosting returns. That's kind of what I'm trying to teach people more is like, hey, you could go out and do it the old way, but if you can get into these properties for 5 to 10% down, 3, 4, 5% interest rates, I mean, that's a pretty amazing way to break into this industry in 2024 when everyone out there is, I don't know, chasing arbitrage. They're following that guy who's like, or girl that's on the beach and they're like, I'm making $10,000 a month passively and I don't own any units. And I'm tired of it.
I never understood that.
Yeah. I do it. I have some arbitrage and I've done it mostly for education for my students because I know it's an accessible way to break into the industry. But 2024, I'm putting an end to it. I'm tired of it. I think that creative hosting is a really accessible way to break into this business.
Yeah, I started with arbitrage. That was how I got in without that being a term at the time because it was 2012. But
I think back then it was just called lying to your landlord, no?
Yeah, basically that. It was called subletting, you bitch. Yeah. So I did it legally. I always had like a little clause that said I could sublet. But for me, I learned very quickly. My very first property that I bought, and timing, whatever, I was lucky, but it earned 100% or $100,000 in equity, within a few months of me buying it. And I'm like, you just don't get that if you're arbitraging. You're really dependent on cash flow. You live and die by that. So I just don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, I've got 3 units right now. To be honest, one of them absolutely crushed it last month. I think our rent on it was $3,300 and expenses are like $4,000, but our gross was $9,000. And I was like, I'm over here talking crap. And then I was like, wait, hold on, we made how much? $9,000 on an apartment? It is cool, and I understand the allure, but it's a temporary business model, people. And I'm just going to be saying that for the rest of my life. But what's not temporary is equity. Well, I guess on the short term, it could be, depending on where in the market you are. But listen, stay with me here. If you hold on to a property forever, equity will make you super, super wealthy. And I just think that creative finance is the biggest opportunity in 2024. Do you agree or disagree? You can disagree if you want to, but what do you think?
I think that's the best opportunity we have now. And it's okay if you're wanting to do midterm rental or long-term rental, but you can still utilize creative finance. And I think that's going to be your most important tool in your tool belt, probably even into 2025. And then after that, we've got to be flexible, right? Who knows what's coming around the corner? But that's part of what's great about real estate is that we're always learning and growing.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the channel. I'm so excited to work with you. You have posted, I don't know, 15 deals in the last week. You have 3 under contract with my students. You're absolutely crushing it. And if people don't follow you right now, which they absolutely should, if you're watching this video right now and you've made it this far, I want Ziana's Instagram to explode with my YouTube subscribers. So where can people find you?
Yeah, Instagram at Ziana McIntyre. And then my website is zianamcintyre.com, where you can see all my deals.
Awesome. And then if people want to buy your book, they can just look it up on Amazon, the Bigger Pockets store, all that good stuff.
Yeah, Bigger Pockets. That's the best place.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we're going to have you on. I think we have a couple of ideas planned for some other cool topics that we'll be doing on the channel. But again, I cannot thank you enough. I'm excited to keep working with you. And I'll let you cover the screen and close us out. I'll say we'll catch you on the next episode of Raw Built, and then you do the hand cover thing. Ready? Catch you on the next episode of Raw Built. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.